Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming out on a Saturday afternoon to hear a lecture on images of Krishna and the history of Indian art. And thank you so much, Dr. Dogra, my good friend, for that gracious introduction, and also Abbas Kumar for organizing everything, and Mr. Gupta, who I had the pleasure of just now meeting. And also, I spent actually a wonderful morning at your Memorial Art Gallery here in Rochester for the first time. And I was duly impressed. Thank you, Nancy Norwood, for the wonderful tour and showing me the gorgeous miniature paintings in the collection. You actually have quite a treasure here about which I did not know before. So, my previous visits to Rochester were just to visit Dr. Dogra and Nalini only. So I was so happy to have this chance to meet now more of the community and to see the treasures and resources that you have here. So with no further ado, I will start with today's lecture. And I'm going to start actually with a very personal image. This is a painting of Krishna that's very recognizable. We would instantly know this is Lord Krishna. He's blue, he plays the flute alluringly, he's beautiful, he has the peacock feather in his headdress, and an adoring gopi, who must be his beloved Radha, is there listening to his playing of the flute. And this is what we would immediately recognize. And honestly, this is my very earliest memory of Krishna. This was painted on the cover of a sweets tin that my mother had picked up in Calcutta in 1968 when she was studying for 1 year in India. She was a scholar of Chinese Buddhist art, traveling in India to learn sources of Chinese Buddhist styles in India. And she received this as a gift, and it sat on her desk full of paper clips. And one of my first memories, very early memory, is just loving this image, thinking this is so beautiful, and who is this beautiful blue boy? So this is a recognizable image of Krishna that we all recognize with the kind of iconography that we understand today. But what I'm going to show you now is the changes that images of Krishna that were created by visual artists in India for the last 2,000 years, how this image has changed and how various forms and periods of his life have been emphasized at different points in time. So I will actually start by showing you some sculptures because we don't have paintings that survive from before the 15th century, really. I mean, there may be some very, very poor condition murals from the 10th century or so, but the earliest images that survive of Krishna are in sculpture form, or in this case, on a coin. So this is actually, I think, the oldest surviving image of Krishna. On the left, it's on the recto of a coin. This is a square silver coin that was struck by an Indo-Greek king by the name of Agathocles, who ruled in Bactria, which is today in Afghanistan. And he was a devotee of Vishnu in this form of Vasudeva Krishna. So Vasudeva Krishna is on the recto of the coin, and where he's recognizable by the chakra, or the wheel, that he holds as his major iconographic attribute. And on the verso, the other side of the coin, is his brother Sankarshana Balarama. So we may recognize him just more easily as there's Krishna and Balarama as brothers. But in this early period, this is now the early 2nd century BC, they were known as Vasudeva Krishna and Sankarshana Balarama. And they were always shown as these mature heroes carrying swords and weapons. Sankarshana Balarama holds a plow in one hand. And of the earliest images, he's holding it up in his left hand there, the earliest images of Balarama all show him carrying the plowshare. So it shows this kind of agricultural association of Sankarshana Balarama. So Vasudeva Krishna with the wheel, Sankarshana Balarama with the plow. Now, the next earliest existing kind of evidence in peninsular India for the worship of Krishna is written in inscription on this pillar that's dated to 113 BCE. And it records the visit of an Indo-Greek ambassador from the Greco-Bactrian king by the name of Antiochus. And his ambassador's name was Heliodorus, so he was a Greek. but he's Heliodorus the Bhagavata, which means that he was a follower of Vasudeva Krishna and Sankarsana Balarama. So throughout the 2nd century BCE, it seems like these Indo-Greek kings of Afghanistan and Bactria were followers of Krishna and Balarama. Then, just proceeding forward in time, in Mathura, there are these 2 torsos made of sandstone that were found together with an inscription identifying them as torsos of the Vrishni heroes. And now at this point, we understand the Vrishni heroes to be heroes of the Vrishni clan. And they were Vasudeva Krishna and Sankarsana Balarama. The other Vrishni heroes were Krishna's son, Pradyumna, and grandson Aniruddha. And these were the heroes of the Vrishni clan. And this is how they were predominantly recognized during this early period. During the Kushan period of the 3rd century, now CE of the Common Era, we start getting more theological representations of, again, this heroic form of Vasudeva Krishna. We don't have any infants or any images of Krishna as a youth. It's always this mature, heroic form of Krishna as Vasudeva Krishna, which we see as the central icon here in this sandstone piece. And then emerging out of his right shoulder is Sankarsana Balarama. And this is part of the Bhagavata idea that Vasudeva Krishna had 4 faces or vyuhas that are manifest in the form of the Vrishni heroes: Krishna, his brother Balarama, his son Pradyumna, and his grandson Aniruddha. So what we see in this sculpture is Vasudeva Krishna facing forward, associated with the Western direction and royalty. And then emerging out of his right shoulder is Balarama, and he has, you notice, these serpent hoods behind his head. So Sankarsana Balarama is also associated with the serpent, like a naga, and then later texts identify him as an incarnation of the serpent on which Vishnu lies when he lies on the cosmic ocean. So Vishnu incarnates himself as Krishna, the serpent as Balarama. And here Balarama is also shown holding a wine cup. Balarama is fond of drinking. He's most always drunk. And this is because his reality is opposite to that of what we recognize. So which brings that he has to be drunk in order to interact with us on a human plane. Also during this early period, the Kushan period in Mathura, another place where you'll find Krishna is as a devotee of the Jinna Neminatha. So the Jain sect or religion in northern India, throughout India, recognizes 24 Tirthankaras or Jinnas who have achieved liberation following the Jain path, which is very much one of meditation and extreme asceticism. So we see here in this sculpture with the standing figure who is nude, standing in this mountain pose, this standing meditative pose. This is Neminatha, the 22nd of the 24 Jinnas to reach liberation during our world cycle. And on either side of him are his 2, basically they are divinities who are able to communicate between the followers on earth and the Jinna in the liberated realm. The one that we see on his right, but our left, has the serpent hood behind his head, so that's Balarama. And on the opposite side is Vasudeva Krishna. So it's very interesting to see the Jain perspective where they enfold and incorporate Krishna and Balarama as basically cousins, actually literally cousins of Neminatha before he reached liberation. And they are the ones who mediate between the Jain followers and the Jinna in the liberated realm. Also in the south, there are fabulous depictions of Krishna and Balarama together. So really, Krishna and Balarama are almost always shown together. And this is from a wonderful relief carved in limestone from Andhra Pradesh, from an area called Kondamodu. It's now in the Guntur Museum in Andhra. And you see Balarama on the left, carrying his mushala this time, his big club. And then Vasudeva Krishna with the flat-topped crown right next to him, and this time holding the shankha, or conch shell, at his hip. Another one of the attributes of Vishnu, of whom he is recognized as an incarnation. So what we see now from the 2nd century BCE until basically the 3rd to 4th century CE, that whole time period, the only way that we see Krishna is as a mature, heroic Vira, a hero, a kind of warrior, a royal warrior, not as this demon-slaying, kind of mischievous, butter-stealing child. That happens with a major turning point during the 5th century. And this is a time when now the Harivamsha has been appended to the Mahabharata. So we've just been looking at visual images, but in textual sources, there were very few written textual sources about the life of Krishna before about the 2nd to 3rd century. The Mahabharata, of course, is very ancient. Scholars differ on exactly which parts were committed to writing at what time. And of course, Krishna plays a central role as the charioteer of Arjuna in the Mahabharata. But it's with the appendix to the Mahabharata called the Harivamsha, which means the genealogy of Vishnu, where the life story of Krishna is actually fully expounded in a written text. And so it's right after that time that we start getting these, what we call Krishna Leela, or scenes from the life story of the entire life, and including the youth of Krishna himself. And we have a number of sculptures now, all of a sudden, in the 5th century, that can be found throughout, especially northern India, such as this example where Yashoda, his foster mother, is churning milk into butter, and the mischievous little toddler is reaching in and grabbing butter out of the churning pot. There's a door jamb from Mandor in Rajasthan with many scenes from the life of Krishna, including lifting Mount Govardhana, which you see in the upper left, and the kicking over of the cart, which we also see in this larger scale panel. So when Krishna was first born, he was born basically to his imprisoned parents, and because his evil uncle, the king Kamsa, had heard that the 8th child of his sister was going to slay him. So he imprisoned his sister, and every time she gave birth, he murdered the child. But upon the birth of Krishna, the father Vasudeva, so now Vasudeva is separated out as the name of the father of Krishna, instead of in the Vrishni hero period where Vasudeva Krishna was one hero. Vasudeva the father spirits away the infant across the river under the cover of night and exchanges the infant Krishna for the infant female child born of a cowherd woman named Yashoda in a cowherd village. And so Krishna is born there, grows up in a cowherd village, but when Kamsa realizes the ruse, he sends as many demonic minions and associates of his to kill the infant Krishna as he possibly can. One of them took the form of a demon that was in a cart that was going to crush the baby underneath the cart, but Krishna just kicks it over. Another comes in the form of this dark bird that you see at the bottom of the cart there, that then becomes an alluring milkmaid that is going to be a wet nurse and suckle the baby, the infant Krishna, with poisonous milk, but he sucks her dry and she dies instead. Another demon is the horse demon. This is the last of the demons. His name is Keshan, and this is a wonderful terracotta from the 5th century, beautifully preserved in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where Krishna, as a child, wearing the big chakra on his chest, is effortlessly slaying this horrific, powerful demon who lies at the bottom of the panel with his hoofs in the air, lifeless. Now, also during the 5th century, this was a time where we start getting monumental, colossal depictions in stone of many of the avatars of Vishnu. So there are basically 10 avatars of Vishnu, and who they are, their identities vary a bit according to textual source. But Krishna is one of these avatars, and this is a fantastic sculpture. The earliest sculpture of Krishna, this is 6 feet tall. It doesn't look like it because he has the proportions of a child. He was 8 years old when he basically told the villagers to stop celebrating the festival of Indra and instead to give offerings to the mountain god. And so Indra became furious and sent torrents and floods and storms to basically destroy the cowherd village and wash away the cows and their livelihoods. But what Krishna did was just he plucked up the nearby mountain, Mount Govardhan, and raised it above his head like a big umbrella, created a shelter for the entire village and all the cows. And all of them were safe from the wrath of Indra. So after 7 days, Indra had to recognize the superiority of Krishna, stopped the rains and came and bowed down before Krishna himself, and then gave him an ablution and basically consecrated him. And this was a turning point for Krishna in his life, where then he comes of age. He turns from being a child and then begins his life as a more mature cowherder and lover of the gopis. And this form of Krishna is, and this time, this colossal Krishna lifting Mount Govardhan is one that traveled to Southeast Asia. So it's during the 5th century that iconographies started spreading out of India into Cambodia and Thailand and Indonesia. And here we have 3 examples, extraordinary examples from around 600 that were carved out of monumental blocks of sandstone in southern Cambodia, just outside the capital city of what was then called the Funan dynasty. The sculpture in the center is at the Cleveland Museum of Art and will be the centerpiece of the next major exhibition, Journey to Cambodia's Sacred Mountain, where he was actually built into the mountain, into a shallow cave temple, holding up the mountain himself. And so we've done drone footage and footage of the canals to get to the sacred mountain, so that we can actually bring the landscape to the visitors of the exhibition, and also using holograms to show the whole life story of the Krishna, how it was installed in a cave and its entire history, how it came from this cave in southern Cambodia to Cleveland, Ohio. There's also a conservation component where different fragments were found at different times, exchanged with another Krishna Govardhan from the same site. So there were 2, these are colossal, over life-size sculptures of Krishna, and there were 2 of them side by side in 2 caves in southern Cambodia. And these different fragments we exchanged back and forth between the National Museum of Cambodia and the Cleveland Museum of Art. So they'll be unveiled in the exhibition. I so hope you'll be able to come. So there were 3 of these Krishnas Govardhana in southern Cambodia during the 5th to early 6th century, and then 2 of them found in Sithep in Thailand that are in the National Museum in Bangkok. So it was a really special moment for these large-scale icons of Krishna lifting the mountain. And shortly thereafter, around 625 in South India, at the wonderful rock-cut site of Mamallapuram on the southeastern coast of Tamil Nadu, where this complete tableau of Krishna effortlessly holding up Mount Govardhan, and then in bas-relief carved into the living granite, the gopis, the cowherders, the cows, who are so grateful and they feel so safe and secure under the mountain in the midst of the storm that their milk starts flowing spontaneously, so the cowherds have to milk the cows. So after the 9th century, there was another major canonical text that related the life story of Krishna called the Bhagavata Purana. And it was then the Bhagavata Purana that was the primary source instead of the Harivamsha or the Vishnu Purana, which were previously the primary canonical texts for the life story of Krishna. So by the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries of the high medieval period of Indian temple building, we have the whole life story of Krishna carved in friezes on the exterior of temples and in the great panels on the exterior of a temple, such as this one from the Hoysala dynasty. He was also, some of his exploits were created in bronze. And we start now getting new iconic images from the scenes of the life of Krishna. Mount Govardhana is still there, but now we also have the subjugation of the Naga Kalya, as in this Chola bronze. The Venugopala, so Krishna fluting, now becomes one of the iconic forms of Krishna. And finally, into the 15th century, we get paintings. So this was a long preamble to lead up to the paintings of the exploits of the life of Krishna. Now, manuscript painting had been prominent in India predominantly among the Buddhists up to the 12th century. and then the Jains, who were avid patrons of manuscripts, especially in Western India, that explained and also illustrated the lives of the Jinnas, especially the 24th Jinna, Mahavira. There are very few written Hindu texts, especially illustrated ones, until finally, this is probably the earliest surviving one from India. This is a painted, illustrated manuscript of what's called the Bala Gopala Stuti. And it was painted in the late 15th century, which was another major turning point in the history of depictions of the life of Krishna. So we saw one turning point in the 5th century, where we get depictions of the Harivamsha with the life story of Krishna. Then with the introduction of the Bhagavata Purana, and now finally in the 15th century, the major watershed moment where there's a fabulous movement called the Bhakti movement, which was current since the 5th, 6th, 7th century, but it had a huge efflorescence during the 15th and 16th centuries, where there were a whole series of saints, such as Chaitanya, who had visions and personal experiences of ecstatic love and devotional relationships with Krishna himself. This intimate connection between a devotee and the god Krishna, a personal connection with Krishna, is one that became preeminent in the 15th and 16th century with a number of important saints who also then traveled to the places described in the texts where Krishna lived and played. And they established Vrindavan, the village and where Krishna grew up, the cowherd village where he grew up, as a pilgrimage site, where they then identified the exact places where things happened, where Krishna turned the cart over as a child, where exactly he stole the clothes of the gopis. And the tree is there as a sacred tree where he hid the clothes of the gopis on the tree. The Yamuna River flows through Vrindavan, and it became a holy pilgrimage center detailing the geography and ecology of the life of Krishna. And it's at that time that we start getting these devotional manuscript paintings. So the Balagopala Stuti, and so lots of different texts as well that are devotional texts that are not just the canonical Puranas that were really in the sphere and orbit only of the Brahmins, these sacred texts of the Puranas, such as the Harivamsha, the Vishnu Purana, the Bhagavata Purana. So these manuscripts, they actually look just like Jain manuscripts. They're probably painted by the same artists who painted the Jain manuscripts, but they detail these devotional hymns about the exploits of Krishna. Here's Krishna holding up Mount Govardhan in a page that's in the San Diego Museum of Art. Exploits from the life of Krishna continue to be carved in temples into the 16th century, such as at Hampi, which was the capital of the Vijayanagara dynasty in Western India, in northern Karnataka. And so every pillar of this sort of 100-pillar temple is carved with a bas-relief scene from the life of Krishna. What you see on the right is Krishna in the tree because he's stolen the saris of the gopis while they were bathing in the river and forced them to come out of the river naked before him, before he would return their clothes. This is showing the need for the devotee to have no covering and no restriction when encountering God himself. On the left is Krishna suckling Putana, the demoness, with the poisoned milk to death. So it's in the 16th century, really, when Indian manuscript painting with scenes from the life of Krishna gets started in earnest. So the Balagopala Stuti was in the late 15th century, but it's almost an outlier. It's kind of the only one from that period. But around 1525, a grand, massive manuscript of the Bhagavata Purana was painted in northern India and lavishly painted with these full-page illustrations with text on the back. And this is pre-Mughal, and artists are now learning how to apply their local styles to Hindu narrative scenes. So here we see Krishna in the Yamuna River sporting with the gopis, the cowherd girls, and there are devas in heaven who are beating the drums and celebrating the joyousness of being able to play together with Krishna. And actually, I saw this morning, thanks to Nancy, you have a page right here that's in supremely good condition from this very manuscript, this rare and wonderful manuscript. Now, in the 16th, so that manuscript was painted in between 1525 to the 1540s. There was another watershed moment in the history of Indian art during the mid-16th century, and that is the establishment of the Mughal Empire. So the Mughal Empire was founded in 1528 by Babur, who came from Central Asia, but he did not have a painting atelier. His son Humayun was in exile for 15 years in Iran and brought back with him 7 Persian court painters to the capital of the Mughal Empire in India. And he's founded a Persian-style painting workshop. But only 6 months after his return to Delhi, he fell down the stairs of his new library and suddenly died, leaving his 14-year-old son Akbar as emperor of this very weak early Mughal Empire. He came to the throne in 1556. He could not read, he could not write, but he loved paintings and wanted to be literate and educated. So he and 7 painters from Iran were not enough to illustrate all the classics and stories that he needed to know. So he, every time he went on campaign to expand the empire, sought from village to village, city to city, talented Indian artists who were painting in the style of the Bhagavata Purana. And he brought them to the Mughal court to be trained by Persian artists and then created this new painting style that we know as Mughal painting. And in the 1580s and 1590s, he was fascinated with Hinduism and wanted to understand the religion of the people he was ruling. So he himself was a Sunni Muslim, but he was interested in Christianity, all forms of Hinduism, Jainism, etc. And so he commissioned a beautifully illustrated manuscript written in Persian, so a Persian translation of the Harivamsha, that appendix to the Mahabharata, and had it lavishly illustrated by now these incredibly well-funded artists. And what we see here is Krishna lifting Mount Govardhan from a Mughal manuscript. So the 16th century, therefore, saw this period where artists are being trained at the Mughal court and are given great imperial patronage. Akbar was also bringing, so his method of conquering India was to go from Hindu kingdom to Hindu kingdom, negotiate with each Maharaja and say, I will either invade your country with my massive forces and army behind me, or you can come and work for me and have great honors as an officer and general and member of a noble of my court. You'll just have to spend 6 months in residence at the Mughal court, at the imperial center, and you'll have to go on campaign for me. You'll have to pay me some tribute and give me a daughter to marry. But then we'll have peace and your territories will become part of the Mughal Empire. And most Rajput kings agreed. So what we have in this situation are Hindu kings from all over northern India and western India coming to work and live at the imperial Mughal court, where they are seeing this massive production of painted manuscripts for the emperor, who was keenly aware of what was happening in the imperial painting workshops. He would investigate and inspect the work of the artists every Friday, confer financial bonuses on the work of the artists that he approved, that he particularly liked. So this new style came about that was very realistic and dynamic. And so these Rajput kings saw this as a model. They're also living at this time where there's this upsurgence in personal devotion to Krishna and his life story. And so then we start getting this whole kind of dispersed history of multiple court ateliers throughout Hindu kingdoms that were subjects or tributary kingdoms under the Mughal Empire, but using local Indian artists that are now brought in as court artists. And so we have early paintings at Hindu courts of Rajasthan, especially, where they're now making painted manuscripts that are horizontal in format, as you would have standard or traditional Indian books were horizontal in format, following the palm leaf manuscript format. And now, having had the idea, having seen the work of the Mughal artists, going back to their home courts for their 6-month sojourns back home and explaining to local artists how to paint a manuscript. But now they want a life story of Krishna because that is their religious affiliation. So this is one of the earliest Rajput illustrated manuscripts of the Bhagavata Purana, painted for the Maharaja of Bikaner in northwestern India, in Rajasthan. We see a lot of the bold patterning and geometricization that we have seen in the pre-Mughal manuscripts of India, but with some more Persianized features that were learned via the Mughal court. So now this is Nanda, who is talking. Nanda is the husband of Yashoda, the foster mother of infant Krishna, talking to Vasudeva, Krishna's father, and making this deal that they would raise Krishna as their own in the cowherd village. So we see 3 cowherd boys behind him there. And Bikaner also the Maharaja of Bikaner also commissioned another series here from around 1600. So this is the time when we first get manuscripts of the life story of Krishna in Rajput courts. Krishna here, very distinctively blue, set against this red square background that is derived again from the pre-Mughal styles. And this is Krishna playing at the Dana Leela, where he's basically flirting with the gopis, the cowherd girls, who are off to get milk and yogurt. And he's saying, oh, you can't pass through my territory without paying me a toll. So you owe me a toll. And so he's trying to get, something out of the gopis. And they say, oh, stop, you don't own this land. So another shift that happened in the early 17th century now is that there become illustrated manuscripts of other texts that were written during the 16th century, such as the Rasika Priya. The Rasika Priya is a verse text that talks about a whole range of moods of lovers. And it basically describes scenarios that lovers go through in order to tease out the mood of the situation. And it's always the Nayaka and Nayika, so the hero and heroine. And what's happening in Indian painting now is that for illustrations of the Rasika Priya, we start having Krishna substituted for the hero. So Krishna now becomes the image of the ideal lover, the ideal man, the ideal hero. And so in this situation, in this case, we have a hero who has taken a mistress, and the mistress happens to run into the wife. And the wife finds out and is trying to strangle the mistress, and the mistress is offering pan to the wife to try to calm her down. So now also in courts of central India, in Malwa, we have a whole another group of artists who are working in a much more local style, creating illustrations of the Bhagavata Purana. Here is Krishna in the tree with the clothes of the gopis, just basically hanging off of the trees, and the gopis having to come out of the water in order to get their clothes. Here's another page from a Malwa Bhagavata Purana where Krishna is raising Mount Govardhan, and the gopis are just adoringly thanking him for saving them from the torrents. You can see the mountain there under the storm clouds with ribbons of lightning and rain falling. The peacocks don't seem to mind. In the upper left corner is Indra, who's furious, and he's telling his Mount Airavata to summon all of the storm clouds of whom he commands. There are many, many scenes now from the whole life of Krishna, not only his youth, but also his adulthood. This is the abduction of Rukmini, one of his wives, and there's Balarama in white. So Krishna is blue, Balarama is white. Balarama is holding the plow, and he's slaying the forces of Rukma, the brother of Rukmini, with whom Krishna is about to elope. Also, during this period, throughout the 17th century, are quite a few illustrations, again, from these devotional texts about the love affair between Krishna and Radha. So, for example, this is a page from the Gita Govinda, which is written by the 12th century poet Jayadeva. And here, this painting is from the point of view of Radha. So Radha has fallen in love with Krishna, and but it's an illicit affair. And so they have to meet out in the forest, and Radha is in the middle of the night. She's out in the forest waiting for him. She's made a picture of him, and she's practicing what she's going to say to him. And she waits, and Krishna just lets her wait. And her Sakhi, her companion, has to go and say, Krishna, come on, come meet your beloved. But Krishna makes her wait. And this is how all of us as devotees need to realize that God will come in his own time. He won't come just when we want him to come necessarily. But the waiting then finally leads to the greatest bliss of union. And then sometimes, though, Krishna is the one who is being shot by the arrow of Rati, the goddess of erotic love. And Krishna is down in the right corner there, and he's about to be shot. And Radha is up in the house, and there's the empty bower of flowers in the forest up in the upper right corner, awaiting the tryst of Radha and Krishna. The school at Bikaner created some of the most beautiful, large-scale folios of the life story of Krishna. This again is an early page from the Bhagavata Purana, where Nanda is conferring with the other cowherds, saying, we have to move because there are too many demons coming to this place trying to kill Krishna. So this is when they move from Gokula to Vrindavan. And then later on in the series, this beautiful page where Krishna has stolen the clothes of the gopis. Another one of these great bhakti poets of the 16th century is Surdas. Now, he was a blind poet, and this is a painting series that relates, that has his poems written at the top and the scenes of the life story of Krishna painted below in multiple scenes. So here, this is one of the early pages with the scenes from the life story of Krishna. Here is Yashoda lying just after having given birth. Of course, the babies have been switched, and little baby blue Krishna is there resting with her. The women of the village are coming to congratulate her. The men, her husband Nanda is giving out coins in celebration of the birth. And down below, there's dancing and celebrations. They're pouring curds over one another, and there's great horns blasting and kettle drums being beaten, and the children are dancing, and it's a great festive scene. And I love this manuscript because Surdas himself is painted on every page. In this case, he's down in the lower right corner, and his eyes are closed because he's blind, and he holds the cymbals as he sings his devotional poems and songs with the life story of Krishna. Here's another page from the same series, farther on in the series, where Krishna actually slays Kamsa. Down at the lower left is the blind poet Surdas reciting the life story. Krishna is killing the demon Bakasura, the crane demon, down at the very bottom left. And then at the top left is the culminating scene where Krishna grabs his evil uncle Kamsa by the hair, drags him off the throne, and bludgeons him to death with the tusk of an elephant that Kamsa had sent to kill him. It's very dramatic stuff. So we get scenes from the life of Krishna also reenacted at court. So this is a court scene from the Maharaja of Mewar. And he has organized on the occasion of Diwali a performance, a reenactment, a theatrical reenactment of the life story of Krishna. And you see there's a canopy that's painted with the storm and Indra bringing the storm. And there's an actor who's wearing a blue shirt who's acting the role of Krishna with the peacock feather in his crown, and he's going to reenact the lifting of Mount Govardhan underneath the canopy. And there are women who are playing music and singing the life story of Krishna. Down south in Andhra Pradesh, we continue to have a tradition of depicting scenes from the life of Krishna, but without any Mughal influence. in the painting styles. So this is the local South Indian painting style that's seen in murals earlier on, but now we find them also on paper series of paper, probably made for series that would be owned by devotees of Krishna. And here's an example of Krishna climbing up and stealing the butter that his foster mother Yashoda has tried to hang from the ceiling to keep it out of Krishna's reach. Balarama is behind him. His association with the serpent is there because he's holding the snake, and his mother is about there to give him a whipping with a danda. And then Krishna is there with the demon Bakasura. He's just an infant at this point. That's why he looks so round and chubby. But this crane demon is one of the demons that his evil uncle Kamsa has sent to kill him. And Bakasura can't stand the pain of his bill being pried apart by this baby. And then the true form, the demonic form of this crane demon is falling out his backside in this very dramatic diagonal composition. So just in terms of other regional depictions of the life story of Krishna, there's a fabulous series from Nepal, the Bhagavata Purana from Nepal. The major pages that exist are actually from the latter part of Krishna's life. This is actually where Krishna's son Pradyumna is returning to Krishna's island palace of Dwarka off the west coast of India, and he had been abducted, and then he met the love of his life and is bringing her home to Dwarka. And actually you have also here in the Memorial Art Gallery a wonderful depiction of the island palace of Dwarka. Now up to the western Himalayas. And to the courts of the Pahari, the foothills of the western Himalayas. And this is a wonderful painting from the court at Basoli in the state of Jammu that depicts the cosmic ocean in between world cycles before Vishnu has created the world. And there's a sage by the name of Markandeya. This is a scene that's described in the Mahabharata, so it's a very ancient tale where Markandeya, the immortals, say he received the boon of immortality. But what does he do in between world cycles? It's so lonely and there's nothing there. It's nothing but endless ocean. And so he just wanders around on the ocean till he comes to a floating banyan leaf and he sees the infant Krishna lying on the banyan leaf, and Krishna explains to him that he is the creator of the world. Also in the Pahari Hills, a court painting tradition arose in the late 16th century, especially in the early 17th century, using local artists and local traditions. The idea of court painting came, but Mughal-style court painters had not yet arrived. And so we get these very dramatic and bold compositions where Balarama, the white god, and Krishna, the blue, are now coming to touch the feet of their parents after the slaying of Kamsa. And this is the first time that Krishna and Balarama are being reunited with their parents who have been imprisoned all this time. And it's an incredibly moving moment, depicted beautifully, I think, in this very bold painting from the hill state of Chamba. Back down into Mughal territory in Uttar Pradesh, at the court of Lucknow. Mughal artists are now starting to branch out, and at the court of Lucknow, we even though it's an Islamic court, we have scenes from the life story of Krishna, such as here where Krishna and Radha are playing Holi with the gopis in this palace setting. 1739 was another watershed moment, another turning point in the history of Indian art, where the Mughal court was sacked by Nader Shah from Iran. The entire treasuries were emptied, and the Mughal emperor Muhammad Shah was no longer able to pay for artists to paint for him. So artists started dispersing to seek patronage elsewhere, including among the courts of Himachal Pradesh in the foothills. And so you start getting this wonderfully naturalistic drawing and painting style, as in here we have the infant Krishna being bathed by Yashoda, his foster mother, after he's just slain the demoness Putana by suckling her dry and to death. And the cow herders now have to deal with her carcass, and they're chopping it up and taking it to the funeral pyre in the upper left. There's also scenes from the raising of Mount Govardhan from the Pahari Hills. So we now see a much more naturalistic style. Krishna is now really effortlessly holding the mountain up with just his pinky finger as he gazes into the eyes of Radha. Then into the 19th century, we have the same bhakti idea where the love affair between Krishna and Radha is foregrounded, where they wait for each other, they don't meet. And even now, remember we saw Radha waiting and waiting for Krishna. But now we also see Krishna waiting and waiting impatiently for Radha. And the artist has brilliantly shown the passage of time and the impatience of Krishna by showing multiple Krishnas as he waits for her by the water's edge, in the grove, and he's just trying to kill time before she'll come. And the metaphor there is that oftentimes we don't follow the path of God ourselves. And he loves us so much that he'll wait. He's very impatient for you to come to him. And the companion Saki is trying to convince Radha to go to Krishna. But of course, she's angry with him because he's been flirting with other gopis. But just like sometimes God might favor one of our friends and not us, and so we feel angry. But Krishna is still waiting for us. This is an extraordinary manuscript where the life story of Krishna is described in a new Purana called the Brahma Vaivarta that was translated into Assamese. So this is a beautiful manuscript in the British Library in London showing Krishna Leela, where he's fluting to all the gopis, and Mount Govardhan is on the left. Coming to a close, I would just like to bring forward one last genre of paintings of Krishna, a very special genre made at a site called Nathdwara in Rajasthan. These are paintings associated with the Pushti Marg sect that arose again during this incredibly ebullient period of the 16th century, where there were many amazing saints who understood this relationship, this very close relationship with Krishna. And Vallabhacharya was actually a Brahmin from Andhra Pradesh who made the pilgrimage up to Vrindavan. And while he was there, he had a vision that there was a black sculpture made of black stone on Mount Govardhan itself. And he had the vision that this sculpture, it came alive, it spoke to him, and identified himself as the incarnation of Krishna himself on earth. So this sacred, self-made sculpture of Krishna, who's actually shown in the act of raising Mount Govardhan, is a black relief sculpture with the mountain scene, Krishna in the center, made of black stone. This became the most holy image for the followers of Vallabhacharya. And in the 17th century, when Vrindavan was under attack during a war, the sculpture of Srinathji, he was called, Lord, the divine Lord, Srinathji, of Krishna Srinathji, the followers and the descendants of Vallabhacharya took that stone sculpture to Rajasthan, where there was a Hindu king who protected it, set him up in a haveli, a beautiful mansion, basically, in the village or the town of Nathdwara in Rajasthan, in the kingdom of Kota. And that became the center of the Pushti Marg sect. And a whole genre of painting arose depicting the priests who take care of this sculpture, and they take care of this sculpture. This is the epitome of devotion to an image of Krishna, seen as the living presence of Krishna on earth. So he's bathed every morning, he's awoken with songs, he's massaged, he's dressed for the day, he's given his toys. And the priests, thank you so much. The priests are all in the lineage of Vallabhacharya himself. And at every moment in time, at every season, he's given a new kind of dress. There are festivals. This is the festival of the flowers being celebrated. It's during the hot season, so he's wearing light garments. And he's given the accoutrements that are appropriate for each festival. So here we have a wonderful 19th century painting from the Pushti Marg sect. I just have two more slides.
I don't, and my apologies. I am really terrible at tech support, which you guys would have figured out by now, but you've got such good content that you'll be fine. I'm actually just trying to make sure that I actually get you back on the live stream. There
Okay.
are actually 18 people watching you live, so it's worth the effort. And as soon as I can get back to the presentation, we should be good to go again. And
I think you're great at tech support.
and hold on just a sec. So what are we seeing here? Yes. And let's see if we can get this full screen. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We also get these new colors during this 19th century period. So you see these pinks. These are colors that are now coming from the West. And what you see here is actually the black stone slab with the relief carving of Krishna raising Mount Govardhan. And then another genre of painting arises that combines photography with paintings. These are called manurav. And this is when there are paintings of Srinathji at a certain point in time at one of his festivals. And devotees who come to worship Srinathji have their photograph taken by a studio just next door to the Haveli. And then an artist will cut the photograph out and inlay it into the painting. And so these are painted bodies and the painted shrine at Nathdwara with the photographic likenesses of the devotees who came there on pilgrimage. And then these manurats will be taken back home as a souvenir, as a memory, a sacred memory of the pilgrimage made to the shrine at Nathdwara. And finally, I will just end, because my talk was really about pre-modern India, with a modern painting by the renowned artist A. Ramchandran, who really carries on not just very what you would consider to necessarily be typical Indian traditions in modern and contemporary art, but also the very idea of substitution. Like we saw Krishna as a substitute for the Nayaka, the artist here has now substituted himself for Krishna, but now he is the one who did not steal the clothes. So with that, I will end, and I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
And the other one by, I think what I would want to sort of share is from my personal experience, having visited the gallery and some of the exhibitions that they put together on the Indian miniature painting. And today we had the fortune of visiting and sort of just watching a conversation between Dr. Dodra and Nancy and Sonya about how much they know what they trying to make into their history. So it's a we trying to introduce. I just let Nancy do the rest of the session. Thank you very much.
I had said my field was medieval art, that wasn't medieval art. When I came to where I am 20 years ago, I also studied the ancient and Asian collections, including South Asian collections. And it was very daunting at the beginning, but we had this fantastic collection of nature painting that needed conservation. So I started trying to chair about 4 years ago, nature painting, and I did an exhibition. I learned a lot, but I know that much compared, obviously, to Sonya. So this is something very, very interesting for me. So I'm very interested in beautiful and expecting that she will come more and give us much more love. But what I didn't like to do is open it up to you to ask me questions. Because that was just a tip of the iceberg. So I think very
Giving the insight So I have two questions for you. The first question is there a particular reason why Lord Krishna is depicted blue? And the second is, did Akbar also translate Mahabharata and Ramayana into Persian to be consumed by the Persian-speaking people in the Iran and other places? Thank you.
Oh my gosh, those are such great questions. I swear I didn't ask him to ask those. But they're great questions. I'm going to answer the second one first. It's a shorter answer. So yes, Akbar commissioned a translation into Persian of the Ramayana. It's actually Akbar's mother who commissioned it, and she commissioned a beautiful illustrated copy of the Ramayana that is in the Middle East, there in Qatar, and in the Islamic Museum, and also partly in the Friar, the Smithsonian. Incredible from the 1580s. As for the Mahabharata, he also had it translated into Persian. It was called the Rozamnama, which is the Book of Wars. Also illustrated, but he made it required reading for all of his courtiers, especially the Mughals who are in the court, saying, you cannot rule this country without reading this text. If you want to understand India, you have to learn the Mahabharata. And he would test them. So he commissioned copies for all of his nobles, so that everyone would understand and know the Mahabharata. There's a very famous copy that was commissioned by the Khan Kanan, his chief vizier, in 1616, very lavishly illustrated, that's dispersed in a number of collections. The first question, why is Krishna shown as blue? So Krishna means black. It means dark in color. So the depiction of blue is very often interchanged with black. So sometimes Krishna will be green, sometimes he'll be black, sometimes he'll be gray, sometimes he'll be blue. So there are these choices to interpret visually the color that literally means dark. Why is he dark? So the earliest textual reason, it's so interesting, it's in the Mahabharata, where Vishnu is on the cosmic ocean and Kamsa is ravaging the world. Well, actually, Bhudevi comes, his wife, comes and says, Vishnu, I'm the earth, right? I feel so much weight and pressure from all the things that Kamsa is doing. And Kamsa is actually an incarnation of a demon called Kalanemi, who was Vishnu's primordial arch nemesis. So Kalanemi has come to Earth as Kamsa, and he's engaging in all these excesses. Too many cars, too many buildings, too much this, too much that. And the Earth says, it's too heavy for me. I can't stand what he's doing. You have to do something. I'm exhausted. And Vishnu says, of course, my dear wife. And then what the text says is that he plucked a white hair and a black hair and implanted them into the wombs of Devaki and then Balarama's mother, Rohini. And these took root and grew as the embryos that will be Krishna and Balarama. Now, what does it mean to pluck a white hair and a black hair? There's a great religious studies scholar named Andre Couture, who I think has the correct interpretation, and that he's actually plucking it from his antelope skin. So many of you might know that an important accoutrement for Brahmin priests is the skin of the black antelope, which has a white belly and a black back. And priests, in order to sit on hallowed ground, or to create a purified ground, and also while performing the sacrifice, sit on the skin of the purified black antelope, who is also an animal in the sacred fire sacrifice, the Vedic sacrifice. So the antelope stands for the power of the sacrifice. So the power of the sacrifice is powerful enough to create a human incarnation of God, to bring the power. So when you really sacrifice, then the power of that comes to you is enough to bring the power of God to help you. And this is also why Krishna eats so much butter, because the sacred fire, ghee, gets clarified butter poured into it all the time. So Krishna is kind of it's the avatar of Vishnu, but as his power as the sacrifice, the fire sacrifice. So this is the very early Vedic connection with the human incarnation or avatar of Krishna that is then told in stories
as well to a broader audience. So the black hair and the white hair, I think, refer to Balarama and Krishna, taken from the sacrificial animal kept by Vishnu. The other reason, possibly, why Krishna is depicted as, is called dark and depicted as dark, is also found in the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna cannot see the true form of Krishna because he would be blinded by its light, by his light. So Krishna, you know, there's that incredible Vishvarupa panoply that you see when Krishna shows Arjuna his true form. And to do that, Krishna has to give Arjuna a divine eye. When Arjuna has a divine eye, he can see Krishna in his true form with light that's the blazing light of 1,000 suns. And everything that ever was and ever will be is going through his mouth. He's eating him. He has countless hands and countless arms, and it's too much for Arjuna. He can't take it. So he takes off the divine eye and he's Krishna again. So without the divine eye, basically, we all have sunglasses on so that we can stand to see him. So he's dark. He basically covers himself in darkness to shield us from the light that would kill us because we can't take it. And that's why he shines. Like, even though he's dark, he's described as dark but shining like a sapphire, which is dark but has a glow, has an inner light. So because his true nature is pure light, and we are deluded, we don't have divine vision or true vision. We have ignorant vision that's shrouded. We see him as the opposite of what he is. And basically that means that what we see around us, you know, all of our social interactions and all the things we're attached to and we think are real, it's really the opposite of reality. And that's also why Balarama, who is white, has to be drunk all the time, because he has to cut down on the reality of that what we see as real is the opposite of truth. And so he has to, his way of becoming dark is by being drunk, which is why he holds the wine cup. Ah, yes, please.
Other question is,
Why the gopis are always shown with him?
yeah, but they're always fair.
Oh, they're always fair. Well, I think in some depictions they're fair, and some they're mixed a little bit. There are some paintings where there are a range of skin tones that are represented, but I think it's a convention of beauty, and it varies from time to time and place to place. But they are typically, what we're looking at are Northern Indian paintings.
My main question is about, when I have seen a lot of these paintings, and I see most of the temples are sculpted, etc. I got the impression that most of these things actually try to unify spectrum of the surroundings, or they are trying to send it. But they try to example, I have seen the two statues that are found out from the ocean near Alexandria. They're nice statues. Form of it is even they're showing the folds of the cloth. Here. And similarly, another almost up to rock, which they always try to show the perfection of the human figure. In Indian painting, we do not try to concentrate on it. They try to send a message. Now, when I was in 40 years ago, I was in France, and I was looking at the bonnet in Cézanne's place. Only that time you get to see that they get so wider spectrum art like one body, rather than trying to concentrate on the perfect physics. Why is it that Indians never try to show it? There was no influence of the Western world.
So the question is about why is it that Indian artists don't emphasize the perfect, the naturalistic form of the female physique especially. Well, I would look actually to early Indian sculpture. And again, Indian art has changed a great deal over time, but there are periods of great naturalism in Indian sculpture in particular. And Indian yakshis and goddesses from their early stone sculptural sites do emphasize, I would argue, the perfect female form. But the concept of perfection is a little more conceptual. It's not so much that it's mimetic of what an actual living woman would look like necessarily, but instead it's more conceptual, where the ideal of what a perfect female form should look like. And then we find these in poetry, where the perfect form is that of a young mother of age 16. And then, the thighs have the texture of an elephant trunk, and the arms, the limbs like a bamboo stalk. And so it's conceptual and metaphorical in that way, in the literature, and I think also in the visual art. And so idealized female forms are seen as these young mother goddesses. And they're, I would say, more perfect than human. But I think, Indian art was never realistic or naturalistic until after they got the idea from the West that this is something to do. I think mostly because there is a preference for something better than the ordinary, the mundane. That the ideas and the ideals of depiction were traditionally what is taught in schools of art throughout Indian history. Right. Right, not until the British art schools of the 19th century.
I have a different explanation for the question why Krishna is shown as blue. And it's the color of the sky. Sky has no beginning, no end. It's infinite. So blue color represents infinity. That's why Krishna and Rama is depicted in blue. That's the explanation I have.
Yes, I think that's a wonderful connection. I don't think it's mentioned as such in the text, but I still think it works. The ocean as well.
So can I ask some of the people who are watching?
One point, the female part of the there is another interface cannot hear the audio question. And that's the code the microphone and stereo is the one that's transmitting. So if you don't mind getting louder and more, even on the microphone, that helps those guys. And if you think that we can get across,
Yes, I can repeat the question.
there are other questions online, taking over the world. I just want to know. Thank you.
You've done a very good research since 300
You've done very good research about 360 to 80. But as the Krishna is the way it goes like 6,000 years. So do you have any future plans of resistance? Because the resistance is really good. Trying to get a lot of information from the for example, the Buddhism from Cambodia. So if you can do a research before, before the maybe it's kind of like I say.
So the question, sorry, the question was, would it be possible for me to do some more research earlier than the 2nd century BC on this topic? Well, I have to say, I'm trained as an art historian, not a textual scholar, not really a religious studies scholar. And so I really am only trained with the visual material, with the art.
and prior to 180 BC. I'm afraid there are no surviving examples. If there is someday an excavation that brings forward images of Krishna from an earlier period, I would be so very interested, would attempt my very best to do research, but the textual sources that predate the visual sources, I'm afraid I must defer to my philologist colleagues. Thank you.
My question is, I'm not sure if you can hear it. It relates to the first time.
First congratulations for doing a fantastic job. I can't agree with being observed and shared with all the users and users of the computer. But this is the first time I could connect back to, we all have to look at this place with more faith and religions to each other and all kinds of law. Here is a story of a king hiring takers and spreading the word, but using their common sense approach, if you're going to go someplace and work and lead them or in a way it's only necessary you need to understand their culture. So historically, between Hindus and Muslims, Muslim community in India, I was not aware of that. So thank you.
Very kind comment. Thank you very much.
We'll take one more question, and then we have another online question.
Okay.
Thank you for the first talk. I have a question. What is the size of these manuscripts? Is it the same as miniature paintings or different from what you do?
So the question was about the size of manuscripts. Are they different from miniature paintings, or what is the size or scale? So the early manuscript of Gopala Stuti, is that the one you're asking about, the manuscript itself? It's the size of a genuine manuscript, so probably about 10 inches wide by about 5 inches, 4.5 inches high. So that's the size of a manuscript. It'd be a nice package like this.
And Rajput paintings were also from the Mughal court, or they were separate?
So the question was were the Rajput paintings also from the Mughal court?
Were they also from Akbar's court? Everything was derived from Akbar's court, whatever you showed us?
So the Rajput paintings, a number of artists went from Akbar's court to Rajput courts, and then they trained families of artists in these Rajput courts in Rajasthan. And so they developed their own traditions in each one of these Rajput courts. But often, either they went to Akbar's court for a little while and then went back, or then once these painting traditions were quite well established into the 17th century, they learned from each other among Rajput courts. And the sizes of those paintings, they vary quite a lot. They can be quite small, like Nazar paintings, which are about 6 inches high, and then some of them are really large. The one from Diwali with the reenactment of the Krishna Lila, that one is about 3 feet tall. And there are some, actually we're having an exhibition in the summer of 2023 of paintings from the collection of the Maharaja Udaipur, where there are amazing paintings that are done in this quote-unquote miniature style, but they're huge. They're probably the size of half of the screen, but horizontal, so the whole length and half height. So there were very, very large scale paintings on paper made at these courts.
So we'll come back to question A, and we'll comment on all the questions.
Someone said that it was really interesting and engaging. Thank you for that. And there's another person who said a beautiful connection to the question. There's this question: how is the symbolic history of painting patronage and colors mobilized in people today, given the effects of dynamics?
That's a very interesting question. There
are several universities with professors who are teaching the history of Indian art in very, very beautifully.
JMU, MS University in Baroda. So wherever it is being taught, it's being taught properly. But I must say that these professors often receive a lot of very negative feedback. And they suffer. Our colleagues in India and universities are suffering quite a bit from a fair bit of communal derogatory commentary.
The other question is, how are the manuscripts on the preserved?
How are manuscripts preserved? Well, you know, mostly these manuscripts were kept in family libraries, basically. And so originally they would be kept, wrapped in cloth, usually with neem leaves to prevent the insects from damaging them, and wrapped up and kept put away in cabinets and in basically family home libraries or home temples or temple treasuries. And then when the family needs to sell them for some reason, they get sold to a dealer and then they're dispersed, and usually conservators would preserve them. But the pigments are typically mineral-based pigments, which are not so inclined to fade as easily as vegetable dyes, for instance, so they're quite fast. The biggest issue with the preservation of these paintings is with cracking and flaking. Because the pigments are mineral-based, which is basically ground stone minerals, they're quite brittle. And if the paper gets wet, it bends a lot, and so then the brittle pigment layer then is liable to crack and chip and fall off. So that's the biggest concern. So it's best to keep them flat, keep them supported on a hard board, for instance. So that's the best way to preserve them.
Another question, are there any evidence of paintings or sculptures related to Krishna in the Middle East, Asia, and parts of Europe?
Not until the 20th century.
Like, you want to share some of your experiences of Cambodia and other parts of Far East Asia?
So Apas was just asking if I could share some of my experiences with Cambodia and parts of Far East Asia. So Cambodia had a huge interest in Krishna from the very beginning. So from the 5th century, there's one of the oldest sculptures surviving anywhere in Southeast Asia. It's Vasudeva Krishna with the conch shell on the hip, just like the Andhra sculpture that we saw. It's coming on loan to the exhibition, actually. So Krishna and those monumental Krishnas Govardhana, and then during the Angkorian period, you see images of Krishna and Bhagavad sculpture all over the temples. I think there's 6 or 7 of them in Angkor Wat, for instance. And they're all over the country. So throughout the Angkorian period, Krishna was a predominant icon figure. In Thailand, it was only during the early period before Buddhism really became the most dominant religion. In East Asia, Krishna is really not seen much until this period of Pan-Asianism, when Okakura came in the 1880s to Calcutta and started bringing this kind of revitalization of Japanese art, bringing Indian artistic images to Japan. And then you start seeing during the Nihongo period, the early 20th century, Hindu subjects now and then in Japan, but not so often, actually. So East Asia didn't really take on the following of Krishna. They really were much more interested in Buddhism. So the spread of Krishna imagery, I think I showed you kind of the boundaries of it. In Indonesia, I didn't show you anything from Java, but Java has wonderful temples with scenes of Krishna. Prambanan, for instance, is a great temple dedicated to Vishnu, lots of Krishna and Rama imagery as well. So Cambodia and Bali, so Indonesia, Cambodia, Thailand, and then up to Assam and Nepal. So and really those are the borders of Krishna up to Afghanistan. So that's kind of the borders of the Krishna worshiping world. Until of course the Hare Krishna movement in the US in the 60s, and then everything exploded again. Another watershed movement.
Thank you. And just a couple thank you for some of the things that the purposes your museum exhibition as well as the inclusion of the code and including the top for bringing this opportunity.
Oh,
Oh,
lovely.
lovely. Thank you.
Question.
Thank you everybody for organizing opportunity and everybody in Boston. This is the most because I was visiting my family in England and we're so jealous of you being there. The elders of this audience have been very instrumental in making ICC here for the education of our community. We have the Indian Heritage Center as now as a museum that is trying to promote Indian culture. How are you reaching out to the local community, the local students? So I know that we have you folks here too, kind of listen and learn from you. How are you reaching out? How do you learn from what you're doing to do that here in Boston?
Well, thank you for that. So I'm at the Cleveland Museum of Art, which is free to the public. It has one of the greatest collections of Indian art anywhere in this country, and I would argue kind of outside of London and India. It really is. It's not the most enormous collection, but it's encyclopedic. It's such high quality. And they're always on view, free to open to the public. And every few years I put on a major special exhibition like the one that's coming up. And then also I'm continuously giving talks and lectures. I'm doing a distance learning program that will be it's a semester course this coming fall. I teach at Case Western University, so I teach there every 18 months or so. I teach a course. And then anytime anyone in the community invites me to give a lecture, I very frequently do. We have support councils that are like the Friends of Asian Art Society of the Cleveland Museum of Art, the Women's Council of the Cleveland Museum of Art, and I speak to them at least once a year. I also do regular online programs through the Cleveland Museum of Art, and they're all on YouTube or on the CMA website, clevelandart.org, under Learn from Home. And there are videos where I'll give a presentation called Home is Where the Art Is, or On Now, or Desktop Dialogues. So I'm very available and constantly giving presentations.
I had a question.
Yes.
So, what are the communities that you we're visiting, but Indian art history, that we want to go visit?
So the wonderful museums in this country with great collections of Indian art are the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, where A.K. Kumar was the curator for many years. And if you're interested in modern and contemporary Indian art, the PBS Museum in Salem, just north of Boston, has a great collection there. The Philadelphia Museum of Art has an awesome collection, as well as the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, the Walters Art Gallery in Baltimore, and the Freer Sackler in Washington, D.C. The Richmond Museum, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, Virginia, has also an excellent collection. And also, let's see, the Chicago Art Institute and the Nelson Atkins are pretty good, but then the West Coast, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Asian Museum San Francisco, and the Seattle Museum all are wonderful collections as well.
So, another question I have is, every business place, decide what to share. So what process is, you do, like, whether it's this or that, so what is the able to decision-making process and what are you thinking process? How is that?
So for those of you who may not have heard the question is how do museums decide which objects to put out on view and which objects to keep in storage? That is really the job of the curator. That's my primary job as a curator, is to decide what is shown and then write about it. So I recently reinstalled, not that recently anymore, but I reinstalled the latest galleries in the Cleveland Museum of Art. And for one thing, you're bound by space and you're bound by light.
So there are paintings, for instance, that are light sensitive.
Even though they're not as light sensitive as some, they really cannot be out for more than 6 months at a time. And then they have to rest for 5 years in order to prevent them from fading. So that means, and so, there are windows or something, you can't have paintings or textiles in those galleries. So that means that paintings have to be in a certain place. And you want to have a narrative so that, so we'll put Jain art that flows through Jain manuscripts that then introduces the trajectory and history of manuscript painting. You're also bound by material. What do you have that will create a coherent narrative in a space? So I had three separate galleries. So how do I divide those galleries coherently with its collection? We're lucky in Cleveland to have an incredible sculpture collection that pretty much spans the entire history of Indian sculpture up through the 18th century. So I wanted to give some sort of sense of the environment and the context of these objects. And mostly in the early period, they came from Buddhist stupa sites. And mostly at Buddhist stupa sites, all the sculptures come from the railings that separate the sacred space from the mundane world. It's these transitions that designate the difference between sacred and profane spaces. And they are ornamented with this incredible sculpture. And so I tried to give that sense of this boundary. And so I set the sculptures up like a Vedika, there's this railing that separates sacred from profane space. I put by the doorways the kind of images that would be at the gateways or entrances to a sacred site. If objects were in shrines facing out, they're then against a wall facing out into the gallery. So I try to take into consideration the kind of architectural spaces in which these works would have been originally displayed. I have a big glass gallery where that is at the extreme is where I put the bronzes, because the bronzes were for procession out of the temple into the city. So really just kind of using the spaces to give a kind of sense of the context. So that's one way to do it. There are lots of ways to skin a cat, as they say. And it's very nice because every time you refresh the gallery, you can present a new narrative.
Question about how people further down to years ago, which is when what happens around 20 years ago. My question is, the organization covered mostly about paintings, but it did not cover the sculptures of the southern Indian temples, which would have a lot more information possibly. And you also talked about the and you talked about Chaitanya, but you did not cover the Madhacharya, who is the group of Chaitanya, which is what I did. You did not cover about the southern Indian temples, which is where I came from. You have a lot more background to Krishna. I feel like there's some connection that could have been made.
Oh, yes, no, you're absolutely right. So the South Indian temples and sculptures, they're still fairly late. I touched on a bit, how they put on and with the Chola sculptures and Hoysala temples. But again, the South Indian sculptures don't predate the 2nd century BC. But yes, I mean, after the 7th century, everything is depicted. The entire life story of Krishna is depicted multiple times. So that is a major, again, turning point. I just showed one example, so it's like this, but it's all there. So that is when the life story of Krishna is fully depicted. And Udupi is a wonderful center. Actually, my colleague at Case Western was studied at Udupi as well, Deepak Sharma. So he's very intimately familiar with the Madhava movements there. They're not so art-oriented, so it's, yes, again, there are, it's not possible to mention all of the groups, but thank you very much for adding some of the movements that are also of extreme importance in the history of the development of medieval Hinduism. Yes.
On that note, I also want to
Mirabai, yes, of course. She's part of one of the many wonderful 16th century saints. Yes.
think that Sonya realized she actually do have quite a good collection, a small collection, and have to be in Cleveland, Boston, or Philadelphia, but it is hard to corner from you. And we really love to welcome you more into the museum. Our miniature paintings, we have more regular ones, but as Sonia just mentioned, there's preservation to rotate them. So you're always welcome to make an appointment for you to set up a special sort of viewing, and have the patient to look at them. That's something we'd be more than happy to arrange. And another thing I want to say, we will be having an exhibition of, I don't know how many of you know the artist Krishna. She's contemporary artist. Purchased a major award for Super Screen last year, and we also beginning of December, and took it through the spring. So we would like to do something in terms of collaboration with your organization and trying to bring her career in Brooklyn. So we do have the independent road where we want to strengthen that relationship very much. I did have a question for you, which so I've received about the century and how the results which sort of get all of these other events happening beyond that point. And was there something theologically that changed in that, or what would cause that transformation in just something in terms of events in the life?
Sonia, do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, so the question was, what happened that there was such a major shift during the 5th century? And this is a concept so that, before the 5th century, images of Krishna were all the adult hero. And then after the 5th century, you start getting the infant Krishna and many scenes from his life. It's a very complex question, actually. And was there something going on theologically? One of the big things was the writing and dissemination of the Haribhaksha and Vishnu Purana. So that's two things that happened that are very specific to Krishna. But other than that, I mean, there are many things that are happening during that period. It really is the time of the first surge of Hindu temple building. Really before the 4th century, the Hindu sacred spaces were centered around the fire sacrifice, the Brahmanical precincts, and not permanent stone sculpted temples. So the rise during that period of stone sculpted temples also led to a field for relief sculpture and sculptures depicting lives of not only Krishna but Vishnu, Shiva, all of the Hindu gods. It took some time for Hindu temples to start being made in this material of stone. Because a stone, I think, was traditionally considered a dead material. So really, the fire altar has to be made of bricks, which is of the earth, it's living, and it's purified through fire. Stone was dead. It's not wood, which was a tree. It's not earth. It's not a living substance. So it was considered inauspicious. So there were rituals that developed in the 4th century, where stone could be ritually transferred into brick. So with that permission, in a way, to use stone as a structure for temple building, you then now have a place where art can go and should go. And why that happened is, again, scholars argue, but it probably had a lot to do with the success of Buddhism and Jainism, who were making stone temples and stone a place for everybody to go and worship. And they were getting all the lay support and donations and were flourishing. So Hindu sects began doing it also, making a place where people can go to worship and a place to give and sacrifice and give offerings for blessings in return. So the rise of Hindu temple building in the 4th to 5th century coincided with the composition of the Vishnu Purana, with more Puranas that detail the life stories and that are basically commentaries on the early Vedic literature that were really only in the domain of the Brahmins.
One question.
As a curator, do you find, like, for example, you find information that's kind of different or more different? Do you research find what the factors or as a curator you find them based on the architecture or the
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last bit. Do we, based
you
on,
know, really different factors. For example, one administration might be completely different from the other.
right,
So for example, administration is completely different from administration.
right.
So do you go and do research to find what that is mostly real one?
Right.
Right. So the question is, do curators need research to identify unusual depictions, for instance?
Is that a fair restatement of your question? So, like, if there's a painting, we don't know what it is, how do we figure it out? Yes, we do a lot of research, so that is a big part of the job. So we're only allowed to write a short label, under 100 words, but so much research goes behind being able to distill this a little bit of accurate information. And so, but it also depends on, you have to prioritize, because with so many, thousands of works in the collection, you can't devote research time to every single one. But we're lucky at Cleveland, we have a travel budget. So if there's a sculpture or a painting even that's unusual, you can go and travel and see other temples in the area and see if it's there, see it in the context of others, see if it makes sense in a narrative flow. You can research publications, you can try to see if there's any inscriptions or any textual association that might resonate with it. And then sometimes we still don't understand what it is. But yes, research is a big part of the job. And I must say, one of the most enjoyable parts.
And to follow up on that, we have to very looking at the painting and working from we treat a different trip, including the marketing, and then the find the method of project. So there is a text of behind from knowledge. We don't get you to sort of see beyond the work. I think that's a good one. I just wanted to these are single family. This is a watercolor. These are about 4 cubes. And arranged on
One more question.
okay. This is last
Yeah, so the question is about who are the artists? And again, the answer depends. So in Akbar's Court, for instance, we have most of their names, because they did keep a ledger of the artists' names and how much they got paid and all of that. So they were excellent record keepers. And the artists who were particularly favored by the emperor, we know their names, and they're really celebrated in the historical annals. Unfortunately, well, it's just the way it is, that there are not a lot of historical annals written in India by Indian residents or even Indian kings. It's just not something, it's just like, I don't know, it's almost like, Indian artists don't see why should we depict, a portrait of somebody exactly the way they look. There's no historical text that tells the story exactly the way it happened, because it happened on Earth. It doesn't matter. What matters is something greater. So we don't have historical records much, but we do sometimes have names of artists here and there. However, the system is you're born into an artist family. And this artist family has been making art for generations, and they are, and usually most paintings and most sculptures even are joint productions. So that a senior member of the workshop would do the outlines, and then a junior member would color in the broad colors, and then another person is a specialist in hands, and they'll finish the hands. Another person will go in, he specializes in gold, so he'll do all the gold. And so 7 or or 8 separate artists could create one painting. And usually they're never signed, it's just not a tradition. You get a lot of signed Persian artists who lived in India, and they painted a painting in India, and they'll sign their name in like a very clever way. But it just wasn't a thing among Indian artists to sign their work and exert originality in that kind of way.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know there are so many more questions. So I'm going to encourage everybody to write at Sonya after this so that I can get them on the stage. And over to you, Papa. Thank you so much. I also have a comment. Don't miss the I would be very remiss if I just don't have just a very large number of people that it takes to make a village. So for today's event, we have a lot of people supporting us. Krishna, who is the Director of Operations of the ICC, who is here. Dave Patton, who is the custodian, and just sort of sets up the hall and then goes away and does this again. Divya Kumar, who also couldn't be here, but she is the one who does publicity for us, even though she moved away from Rochester. Bal Bhagat standing there, always something at the last minute to help us. Dr. Thomas, who's the go-to for everything. Dr. Vicky Gupta, who's a new member of the board, but is out there helping. And of course, Rajiv Ramachandran. Please give them all a big hand. We also got the benefit of an incredible team of volunteers from the temple. But to name a few, Sanjay Nair, who was celebrating Onam Badal, Sujata Pillai, who was out there, thank you, Ravi Rati, Krishna Kumar, and a lot of other people. I will point out two very special people. One is Dave Anderson, who's back up there, managing the area. So, there is. So, I'll come back to a story regarding what I just told over to you. But all the technical problems that we saw, there could have been many more. If you're walking around with an open mic like this, the mics, the speakers here, that's the gentleman who's sort of making sure that all of us, our voices are heard. So give Dave Anderson a big hand. We have this beautiful, silent, behind-the-scenes person who makes magic happen, which is Radheshan. And the magic will start now. A year back, or more than a year back, when we all pivoted to online, he is the one who made sure that devotees could see the temple puja happening every day. Because they did the streaming, and he perfected it to an hour. So much so that now we can do it also. So it doesn't really matter what the event is, we just need Radheshan. That's just like the event. Some of the brains behind this event, I think the thought started about almost a year and a half back in the fall of 2019, if I remember correctly, it was 2004. And it was largely Mr. O.P. Gupta, Lakshmi at the back, and Dr. Dogra, who sort of put together this idea of an event that sort of turned out to be today's session. And I really want to give them a very big round of applause. The story that I remember about the Maharaj is that Arjun and Duryodhan both go to Krishna, and they're supposed to ask for one thing each. And Arjun chooses to say, I only take you, Lord Krishna, with me. Your armies will go with you. So I think there are some people like that. OPG is one of them. Dr. Dogra is another. You go to them, you get their blessings, and once they're running a program, everything else falls in place. So that was just such a wonderful thing to happen. And then of course, Jonathan Binstock and Nancy Norwood from the Memorial Art Gallery for their support, and of course, opening up the gallery for us. That was beautiful. And yes, I should mention it's on the bus. And Navini, thank you very much for your support. And last but not least, Sonya, thank you for coming.
I'll now hand it over to Dr. Donor to sort of do the closing.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. First of all, I want to thank Nancy Norwood for her time in the morning to spend with us and show all the beautiful artwork. And I request each and every one of us, please do it. And we need to support our culture and our art form. And also, thank you for coming at this afternoon on this wonderful Saturday, rainy day, to help us out with the moderation. I would invite COPG to welcome her with a bouquet and thank her with a bouquet of flowers.
Tatisha, the book is back there. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Vikramji been such a big motivation. I've learned, you know, he's very through the vision, what needs to be done. That's your right today.
Make it happen, kind of personality. Don't worry about money. That kind of personality. It's because of him this took place. I have voted about 18 months ago. COVID came, we postponed. But here it is. It happened. Thank you, Nancy, for coming, the whole team, Temple and ICC. It's so nice to see two organizations working together. And this is the fruit of that. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, honor to work with our community. Now I would like to thank Sonya for a wonderful time, and I don't know how to thank her enough, because even on Saturday, Sunday, it's hard to find her because she's working from morning 5 o'clock to night, 6 to 7, 24/7. And she spared this time. So in her recognition, we want to present her this plaque. And the plaque reads, the India Community Center of Rochester acknowledges Sonya Rhie Mace, George D. Bigfoot, Director of Indian and South Asian Art, Cleveland Museum of Art, for outstanding contributions to the study, awareness, and promotion of Indian art. Please, Sonya. So, all of this contribution, the Indian Community Center is also very pleased to offer her $11 million or $1,000. Thank you.
So thank you very much. All those Indians must end with the phone. I want to thank Freedom and Rosie over there for so that in both the meet of the event as well as the meeting. Help yourself and copy your bag if you can stay around. Thank you very much.
So if you want to leave here, that out. If you want to take out, thank you for coming. We'll celebrate you. I'm going to walk there and do it now.